Hello, seventh grade. Today we are going to look at the elections of 1824 and 1825 and analyze their result and the impact of those elections. And as you can see, Andrew Jackson is going to play a big role in both of them. So, who was running in 1824? A quote, quote, disputed election. Ooh. On one end, we have John Quincy Adams. As his name might tell you, he is the son of John Adams, who was the second president. He'll be the first son of a former president to get elected. Mr. Adams was born into a wealthy elite family. He was groomed by his father, a former president, a well-renowned politician, great mind of law, founding father to lead. And he had a lot of experience, was trained in diplomacy from the time he was a child, spoke multiple languages. He was really, really, really smart and intelligent and was passionate about people's rights. But like his dad, he's pretty high in his morals, pretty stubborn, and was willing to dig in his heels for the right of the rule of law. And he believed in a strong central government to maintain that. A lot of those federalist ideals that his dad also embodied. Also running in this disputed election, which is a four-way election. Yeah, four-way election, is Henry Clay, who we've talked about quite a bit in the past few weeks. You might remember that this Kentucky plantation owner is really known for being a skillful politician. He was one of the war hawks leading up to the War of 1812. He is known as a great compromiser, negotiating multiple different compromises, especially on issues relating to slavery and its expansion. And will be a very long-serving Speaker of the House. In many ways will shape the modern Congress, and will run for president four different times and lose four different times. Oh yeah, and this guy over here, William Crawford, also ran. He was from Georgia, ran for states' rights. We don't really talk about him too much because he didn't really affect the results. Well, there was four people. Who's the other person? Of course, it's Andrew Jackson, champion of the common man. And he looks angry. I would not want Andrew Jackson angry, as he is somebody who killed multiple people in duels. Alright, anyway, so how does the election go? Jackson wins the popular vote, but he doesn't win an electoral majority. What does that mean? Well, in the Constitution of the United States, you have to have a majority of the Electoral College votes to be elected president. And since it was a four-way vote and it was split in four directions, Mr. Jackson didn't have that mandate, didn't have that electoral majority, which means that the vote then would go to the House of Representatives, and each state's delegation would then vote for president. Now, the way that the votes broke down, Mr. Clay actually came in fourth place. Didn't really do so great, but he had a lot of support in Congress and had enough that if he combined his supporters, whoops, didn't want that to happen, with Mr. Adams' supporters, that he would have more than Mr. Jackson's supporters. So newspapers at the time that favored Mr. Jackson started reporting that Clay was working on making a deal with Mr. Adams in order to get Mr. Adams the presidency. He felt that Adams aligned a lot more with his beliefs than Mr. Jackson did. He really did not like Andrew Jackson. He was quoted saying that elected Andrew Jackson would be the greatest misfortune that could befall our country. He really did not want him to be president. So When the vote comes, Clay supporters, like the newspaper predicted, vote for Adams. And what does Adams do? He names Mr. Clay to be his Secretary of State, just like the newspapers predicted. And Mr. Jackson, as the picture shows, is really unhappy about this. He and his supporters go around the country calling this the corrupt bargain. And as you can see, here you see Mr. Adams saying, "Thanks for helping me win the election." And then you see him handing Mr. Clay the Secretary of State. So basically, they made this deal. It definitely didn't help that Mr. Jackson won the popular vote by 10%, but yet lost the election. So this definitely made people feel that the system was rigged, that this was a corrupt system, that those in power denied the voice of the common people. So now Mr. Adams is the sixth president, and he doesn't have a great situation. The country's divided. He has a whole agenda where aligned with that idea, the ideas of the American system, where he wants to spend money on programs to promote the U.S., build up its infrastructure, to build up industry in the U.S., start putting in place tariffs. But because the Congress is divided and Jackson's supporters are getting more and more power because so many people are upset about the election that they're taking more and more seats in Congress, he really can't get anything done. Add to it the fact that, by nature, he's kind of a cold, distant person, didn't really believe in campaigning. He thought that his work should speak for itself, that he didn't need to go and engage with the people. That's not going to work out so well for him in getting reelected. Also, maybe the fact that, he kind of looked like a human egg didn't work out well for him either. That leads us to the election of 1828. And in a lot of ways, 1828's election will become a precursor to what elections are today. First, for starters, we don't have a four-way split. We have two major political parties. That definitely works out in Mr. Jackson's favor. Adams represents the National Republican Party, which is not the National Republican Party today. It's a precursor of what will be called the Whig Party, that believed in tariffs and protecting industry, and protecting business and running the government like a business. And then you have Jackson, who now affiliates himself with a new party called the Democratic Party. This is actually the Democratic Party of today. How about that? So, Mr. Jackson felt that in order to make sure that he won, he didn't just need to win the popular vote. He needed to win by a very, very, very wide margin in many, many different states across the country. And he works to build up a base of support throughout many different aspects of people that he refers to as the common man. And he really draws upon the ideas that he's a self-made man, that he's one of them that was able to build up enough wealth so he can match them and go in and teach these greedy, wealthy elitists a lesson. His party is made up, and his supporters are made up of people from around the nation. In the North, people who are working in the factories, who are starting the beginning of the American labor movement, who are looking for better working conditions, better pay. They see somebody who's willing to take it and fight the wealthy industrialists. All right, that's our guy. The small farmers who can't get any loans from banks, the banking system, and the second bank in the United States. Hey, Jackson wants to break up the banks. Let's do it. He's our man. The southern plantation owners, who are rich and wealthy themselves, say, wait a minute. Jackson's saying he's going to get rid of the tariffs. Those are bad for us. He's a plantation owner himself, owns slaves. He's our man. And Jackson is going to get more and more supporters. Fun fact, in my research, this is something I learned, his supporters often referred to him as a jackass, which is a donkey, If you look at the time, there's a lot of political cartoons showing him by his opponents as a donkey. And he instead, in classic smart political style, used a weapon as a gift. I said, no, I am a donkey because I'm kicking these people in power out. I have a powerful kick like a donkey. And that donkey would become the symbol of his party. And it still is today. How about that? So the political campaign is also a big factor in why this 1828 election is very different. Jackson has a campaign manager, a guy by the name of Martin Van Buren from New York, known as the Little Wizard. By the way, spoiler alert, he'll become the 8th president of the United States. And he convinces Jackson to go all around the country, holding rallies, having barbecues, feeding people, speaking to people all around the country, going on a speaking tour to get people to get support for him. And these rallies become a big deal. Crowds come from all around to hear this guy speak because, again, before this, campaigning wasn't really done. You didn't see George Washington going around trying to convince people to vote for him. So this is a new idea, and once again, this is a common man reaching out to the common people to get their vote. He holds fundraisers. That's a big part of politics today, to get people to help him get elected. He curries favors with newspaper to get them to write good stories about him. And all this, as you see, is now all part of what we see in our modern election system. And this pulls the Americans, the common everyday Americans, much more into the election. Before this is something that happened in the Electoral College. They didn't feel like they played a big role in it. But now it's really this Democratic Party is making this election democratic. In fact, you can argue that the 1828 election was the most democratic election in the U.S. up until that point. Because most states before this only allowed people who owned property the right to vote, who allowed them suffrage. By 1828, every single state had laws that mandated that all white males over the age of 21 had the right to vote. So if you were renting, if you didn't own property, you still have the right to vote. This opens up the doors to voting to many more people. In fact, this will be our first election where we have over 1 million people vote, and it'll be 4 times the previous election. And with that broad base of support, Jackson wins in a majority landslide in the electoral vote and by the popular vote. So, let's go back to that 1824 election for the question. And why did Jackson's supporters call the results of this election a corrupt bargain? And in your opinion, was it corrupt? Or did John Quincy Adams win it fair and square? What do you think? Let me see your answers. Have a great one. Bye-bye.